Ecclesiastes 5, picking up in verse 8 of chapter 5. He talks for 2 verses about oppression and injustice. I don't think this is a drastic change necessarily in the context, but it gets that feel. But I think as we keep going, as we get into later chapters, we'll see that there is a general flow that actually carries through several chapters here. The middle part of the book becomes, a lot of people look at it as a series of Proverbs. I don't think it's so much a series of Proverbs. I think there is a flow to it. But the nuances are separable, and verses 8 and 9 create one of those nuanced things. If you see in a province the oppression of the poor and the violation of justice and righteousness, do not be amazed at the matter. For the high official is watched by a higher, and there are yet higher ones over them. But this is gain for a land in every way, a king committed to cultivate fields. All right, what is that all about? By the way, if you have footnotes in your Bible, you might notice the end of verse 9 has a footnote that says the Hebrew verse is uncertain. They do the best they can in translating this verse, but it's a difficult passage to translate. And so if it's a little bit confusing, it may be because it's not translated well. So we got to figure out in context what this means to the best of our ability. This chapter began telling us to fear God, right? That's what we see from the first 7 verses. I don't think that there is a complete shift. I think instead what we're seeing is the vanity that happens on the earth when people don't fear God. If you see in a province the oppression of the poor and a violation of justice and righteousness, do not be amazed at the matter. What's he telling us? Well, he's telling us that people in the world do not guard their steps, and they do not let their words be few, but instead they determine for themselves and do what's right in their own eyes. That's a mantra we hear all throughout the Old Testament, right? Talking about the people of God who had the law of God and the prophets of God, it over and over says of them that they did what was right in their own eyes. That's what happens when people don't listen to God and instead they want to do all the talking. Their dreams increase and their words grow many, and they have plans and they determine what ought to be done. And what of all that? Well, it's vain. What's the best thing to happen? Where is the true gain to be found? In a king committed to cultivating fields. I'm not sure about this, I'll have to be honest, but the best sense that I can make of it is I go all the way back to Genesis. And the picture that's presented in Genesis for man, and Adam, after the sin, was told that he was going to have to do what? Work. And by the sweat of his brow that the earth would produce for him his bread. Okay? I think that what this is saying is that the best situation is for man, and looking at it from a top-down position from the king, cultivating the ground, doing the things that God gave man to do. Not doing the things that we want to do, but doing the things that God gave us to do. In other words, listening to God. Rather than doing because our pursuits ultimately are vain. Now, are our pursuits sometimes successful by human standards? I have to qualify it that way, I guess. Did the people in Babel, for instance, did they successfully build a great city? Did Babylon successfully build a great nation with a great army and take over a large portion of the world? Did Alexander the Great take over a good portion of the earth? And we can keep going down this list. Has the United States become a powerful and wealthy nation? Do the things that we plan to do sometimes end in wealth and success by earthly standards? Yes. Now listen to where he goes with this. There's a connection here. He runs right into, he who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves his wealth with his income. This also is vanity. Again, I don't think we've got a completely disjointed conversation going on. I think that this is the opposite side of the coin that he's just described. A king that tends to doing the things that God gave man to do, cultivating the fields, is in truth successful. But the folks who pursue money won't be satisfied with money. People that love their wealth and their income, it turns out to be vain. Just because I can make myself great, just because I can make a nation great, just because we can be wealthy, that doesn't mean we've succeeded. Just because we can build great barns and store up great amounts of stuff so that we have everything that we need for a long time, what might God say? You fool. This night your life is required of you, and who will have what you have stored? Didn't Jesus teach that? When goods increase, look at verse 11. When goods increase, they increase who eat them. And what advantage has their owner but to see them with his eyes? Yep. I don't either. Right. And let's be frank. How many meals can I eat at one time? One. I can eat one meal. That's all I can eat. If I have enough food for 50 people, what good does that do me? How many meals am I going to eat? One. But where goods increase, listen, people come out of the woodworks. They'll happily come take it off your hands. As one person recently said, they said they had all kind of trouble. They bought one of those DNA kits, and they were hoping that they would find long-lost family that they didn't know they had, and they had no luck finding their lost family. Then they won the lottery, and their family came out of the woodwork. That's kind of what he's talking about here. When goods increase, they increase who eat them. All that's going to happen is people come to take it from you. And listen, if people don't come take it from you, the government will take care of it. What advantage has their owner but to see them with his eyes? I can own 50 cars, but how many of them can I drive at a time? One. What advantage do I have other than I can look upon all of them and see them? And say, well, those are mine. I can own 1,000 pair of shoes, but how many can I wear? One. All we can do is see this stuff with our eyes. Sweet is the sleep of a laborer, whether he eats little or much, but the full stomach of the rich will not let him sleep. This is not literal language. This is not saying if you go to bed with a full stomach, you don't sleep well. This is not saying that if you go to bed hungry, that you're going to sleep sound. This is contrasting the laborer, the person who is working hard for his daily bread, contrasted with the one that he's describing here that loves money and isn't satisfied with whatever he gets. And the stuff just keeps piling up, and all he can do is look at it. That kind of a life is not successful. There is a grievous evil that I've seen under the sun. Okay, that statement appears several times in the book of Ecclesiastes. It is always him saying, this is what I see happening on the earth, and it isn't a good thing. Riches were kept by their owner to his hurt. People store up so much stuff that they actually hurt themselves. Not physically, but what did Jesus teach about rich men? Okay, that's the language, that's the metaphor that's used to describe what? Let's paraphrase this in the direct language. What is God teaching when he says that it's easier for a camel to go through an eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of heaven? What's he saying? There's some discussion as that being a possible explanation for that. Or it could just be a ridiculous hyperbole. The point is that wealth can become a stumbling block. That it can keep people away from God. There is a grievous evil that I've seen under the sun. Riches were kept by their owners to his hurt. Remember again the rich young ruler. I bring him up a lot, but he went away, he left, he wanted salvation, and he studied the law, and he disciplined his life, and he did what was right, but he owned a lot of stuff, and Jesus said, okay, give your stuff away, and then you'll have life. And it says that he went away sad because he owned much. He stored up riches to his hurt. They became more the focus of his faith than God. He didn't fear God. What did the rich young ruler fear? Not having wealth. Is it wrong to be wealthy? No. Is it wrong to put your faith in your wealth? Yes. Is it wrong to live your life where you seek first wealth? Yes. That's a grievous evil that he sees among men. That the pursuit of possessions and wealth and the collection of these things to a person's hurt goes on under the sun. And those riches were lost in a bad venture, and he is father of a son, but he has nothing in his hand. What a terrible, terrible thing that you get a father that doesn't invest his time training up his children in the way he should go, but instead pursues wealth, thinking and planning that at least he's going to have a lot of money to leave his children, only to get into a business venture and it's lost, and his children end up with nothing. That's how fleeting wealth is. We've got several extremely wealthy people in our nation. Another 1929, and they're going to be on the same level as the rest of us. For those of you that aren't old enough to know what happened in October of 1929. They did. Because, why did they jump off the top of buildings? Because they lost their stuff, and their stuff was everything. That's what he's talking about. Don't fear material existence. Jesus put it this way, don't fear the one who can kill the body, but rather fear the one who destroys both body and soul. It's a grievous evil that men and women like you and me get consumed by the worries and the riches and the pleasures of this life and therefore bring no fruit to maturity. Luke chapter 8, parable of the sower. As he came from his mother's womb, verse 15, he shall go again, naked as he came, and shall take nothing for his toil that he may carry away in his hand. There is not a thing that we own on this earth, or we come into possession of on this earth, that is going to leave this earth when we die. We are born into this world with nothing, and we leave this world with nothing. So what matters is not the things that we encounter on the earth. Something else has to be more important. That's the contrast that's going on here. Again, he has set his mind to determine and to see what is the purpose of man. He's employing his wisdom, and he's looking at all the stuff that goes on under the sun and trying to determine what the purpose of man is. And what he keeps coming to is, you know what? It's not material. The purpose of man is not material. This also is a grievous evil. Just as he came, so shall he go, and what gain is there to him who toils after the wind? It is striving after the wind to collect great wealth, because great wealth doesn't go with you. The pharaohs of Egypt believed that their great wealth and their toys and their trinkets and their all kind of stuff would go with them into the next life. And then tomb raiders came along hundreds of years later and collected all that stuff and stuck it in museums and sold it and made a lot of money off of it, because all that stuff was still in the tomb that they put it in. That stuff doesn't go with us. Life is not about that. Life is not about anything that stays on this earth. So Jesus said, don't store up for yourselves treasures on earth. What happens to the treasures on earth? Well, moths eat them. If they're wool, if they're fabrics, insects consume them. They rot, they fall apart. Moths and rust, if they're metal, they rust. Destroy them. Water did it to my mom. Took almost everything she owned. But that's what happens to the things of this earth. Moreover, all his days he eats in darkness and in much vexation and sickness and anger. That's what life is like for someone who is consumed with the physical existence. Disappointment, despair, hopelessness. Behold, what I have seen to be good and fitting is to eat and drink and find enjoyment in all the toil which one toils under the sun, the few days of his life that God has given him, for this is his lot. Again, don't make more out of verse 18 than we need to. It's simply telling us to be content with what we have, to be content with the circumstances we're in. Yes, sir. And the body's more than clothing.
And then he said at the well, there's even the water you drink, you don't have to drink it again, but there's water that he offers.
That's living water. That is a very, very good comment. For the benefit of those that are watching online, the passage where Jesus taught about the fact that even the water that we drink, we're going to have to drink again. We're going to get thirsty again from the water that's drawn from the well. But the water that he offers is a water of life that wells up from within us, and in which if we partake of it, we never thirst. It's a different metaphor. It's the same contrast. If we're drawing our hope and satisfaction of life from the material things of this life, we're going to not be satisfied. If we're drawing them from God, we get perpetual satisfaction. To the point that Paul and Silas at midnight in a jail cell, chained up, put in stocks, having been beaten, can praise God and sing hymns. When James says, when are we to sing hymns? Is anyone joyful? Let him sing a hymn. How in the world could Paul and Silas be joyful in those circumstances? Because their hope wasn't in the things of the earth. Their hope was in God. Let's read verses 18 again and read it with verse 19, because this actually is an expansion of some things that he had said earlier. Behold, what I have seen to be good and fitting is to eat and drink and find enjoyment in all the toil which one toils under the sun for the few days that he has life that God has given him, for this is his lot. Everyone also to whom God has given wealth and possessions and power to enjoy them. Both of those things have to be given, by the way. Wealth and possessions and the power to enjoy them. Because some people get wealth and possessions, and what happens? They're taken from them and they can't enjoy them. But he is saying, unlike the rich fool that Jesus taught about, who built up the barns and put all that stuff up, and then this night your soul's required of you, this is someone who God gives the power to enjoy this wealth and to accept his lot and to rejoice in his toil. Notice that even the wealthy have to accept their lot and rejoice in their toil, not in the spoils. And rejoice in his toil. This is the gift of God. The ability to be able to be content in whatever circumstances we are in. That is a gift of God. And it happens when we draw near to listen. And we find out what he has said. He will not much remember the days of his life, because God keeps him occupied with the joy of his heart. Isn't it great to conceive of a life that is so full of contentment and joy in a relationship with God that we don't remember the toil, the hardship, the persecution, the difficult things? No, I don't remember those things because I'm occupied with my joy. What's that old kid song? I got the joy, 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 joy down in my heart. What's the next verse of that? Anybody remember? I don't know if it's the next one or not, but it's the only other one I remember. I got the love of Jesus down in my heart. Don't think that those two things aren't connected. What a wonderful thing it is to be so close with God and so content with God that, like Job, whether you're the wealthiest man or the poorest man, you're equally satisfied. What did Job do when he lost everything? He said, naked I came into the world, and naked I shall leave. Blessed be the name of the Lord. He was too busy being satisfied with what God had given him to do to be consumed by what had befallen him. And that is what Paul came to understand later in his life when he said, I've learned to be content in whatever circumstances I'm in. I've learned how to have an abundance and how to be in want. In any and all circumstances, I've learned the secret. I can do all things defined by all of those. There was a string of extremes that he had named. Having more than I could possibly use and having nothing at all. In the extremes. I've learned that in all things, I can do all things what? Through Christ, who strengthens me. In other words, because of the relationship that we share with God and the knowledge that we have from God, we can be just as content in the one situation as we are in the other situation. Not as comfortable, Listen, Job wasn't comfortable at all. He was sitting in the town dump, covered in boils, using dirty old potsherds to scrape open his boils and drain because he was in such pain. He was trying to find relief any way that he possibly could. There was nothing comfortable about his situation. But he could still be content, knowing that he hadn't lost what really mattered. His barns were gone, his flocks were gone, his family was gone for the most part. But he knew God was there. Had some questions. He was frustrated. But he knew God was there. Is that the first bell or the second bell? That was the second one? I guess I need to stop. Good place to stop anyway. Into chapter 5. We'll get into chapter 6 next time, Lord willing, as we continue to go down this same path. Right after talking about the material things that we can come into possession of and lose, he then talks about length of life. Is the secret to happiness having a long life or having a short life? Or which is better? Or which is... He's going to examine that question. And it's important for us to learn that as well. Appreciate those that have been watching online. Appreciate those that are present here tonight. And Lord willing, we'll see everybody. Actually, next week, I think, is the first Wednesday. So that'll be Singing Wednesday next week. It'll be 2 weeks from